Well, I'm back. All right, tonight we're going to discuss that prayer group I was the founder of back in 71. I know some of you weren't even born yet in 1970, but I had graduated from high school. So that kind of dates me, doesn't it? It was a good year for any of you that weren't around. It was a great year. So, okay, we're going to talk about this prayer group that is nationwide, and it's in a couple of different countries. And what started it? It's called Blue Eruption. And what started it was I graduated in 1970. And the big deal where I went to school and grew up and what have you, the big deal was a McDonald's that was in another city. And oh my gosh, it was the big deal. If you drove your car up there, got a burger, and kind of hung out and talked with everybody. It was a big deal back then. And now it's fun to meet up with people, the youth, and they go to coffee houses. Well, back then we went to McDonald's and, the food was delicious. And you got so much better in quality, nutrition, and a fantastic price. So I'd entered college, but I was working full time. So I didn't have enough time to drive from the university all the way to my mom and dad's house where I was still living, and then drive all the way over to go to my job because I had to put my own way through college. Not at all how some people are today. And not only that, I was determined that there was not going to be any college debt. If I didn't have the money, I wasn't going to go. So I was determined to attend college to where I worked hard. And there were many nights, to be honest with you, that all I could do was take a quick nap in my car, do my homework in my car, and go on off to my job or what have you. It was like my car was my main source of survival. So here I was hungry. I drove up to McDonald's. Well, it was a summer evening, and it was not real hot, but it was mosquito-y. And I sat in my car, and I was so overly tired and so numb. And I had been studying my brains out for a test because after I graduated from high school, I was determined I was going to start taking classes right away. So that meant that while all the other kids that were, finally graduated, they were going to kick up their heels until the school started. Well, I wanted to have the racer's edge. So anyway, I was like absolutely hypnotized with being so overly tired. I sat in my car at McDonald's and I started kind of like zoning out. And my eyes went to the cop that was like their guard at McDonald's. And McDonald's had a contract with the city police that they would contract out city police each night. There was a particular policeman, and they were there, visible, to deter any type of garbage. So I started watching him, and I thought, he's all alone. And I'm thinking, he's just standing there all alone. What is he thinking about? Does he have family? And, the kids would walk back and forth and go in and out of McDonald's, and they would pass the cop. Nobody'd say a word. They would act like he was invisible. And I thought, this guy, he's got feelings. What is wrong with you people? So I'm watching, and finally, I got out of my car and I walked up to him and I said, "Are you allowed to talk to people?" And he said, "Absolutely." And I said, "Well, I want to talk to you and keep you company." I said, "I've been watching you. And it's so sad for all the things you cops do for us. It is sad that nobody has been acknowledging you when they walk in or walk out of McDonald's." And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Isn't that funny?" He said, "I never would expect anybody as young as you to notice that." And I said, "Well, it hurt me." So we started talking. I got to know him. And he recognized my car. It was a brand new car. And it had a smashed door. Not too bad that I couldn't open it. But he recognized my car. And he said, "Aren't you the one that got hit over on such and such road?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "How did you know that?" He said, "Because I recognize your car." And he said, "I tried to answer that call, but it was already being taken care of." And he asked me, he said, "Why did you tell everybody, forget it, you would not press charges?" And I looked at him and I said, "You know what?" I said, "That was a young kid that did not have a driver's license. His mom was a single parent, and she had organ practice. She played the organ for her church, and she had organ practice. Well, he was supposed to be home taking care of his little brother because she thought he was mature enough. Well, he took the keys to her other car, and he's bebopping around, and he smashed right into the car that I had only had 1 week. And when they got a hold of Mom, she came flying down there, and it just hurt me so bad because all she could do was sob, asking God, how could this happen, that she's trying so hard. And you could tell that her heart was ripped wide open. And I looked at her and I thought, I can't turn it in. So I'd rather face my mom and dad for my brand new car being smashed any old day than upset her life. So I explained everything to the cop there at McDonald's. And he looked at me and he said, "I remember them talking about you down at the station." And I said, "You're kidding." I said, "Why?" And he started laughing. He said, "You are unbelievable." And everybody was rooting you on to turn that kid in. Because I guess he is a handful. But I didn't want to be the one. I didn't want to hurt his mom. So anyway, I explained it to the cop, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if we could just have all the honest cops overriding all of the ones that are stinkers? And he looked at me and he said, I work with both kinds. And he said, I would love for that to erupt. Hence, Blue Eruption. And it was like I just started thinking about how wonderful that would be if everything started erupting into the rights would be right and the wrongs would be revealed. And I know we're living here down on earth. It's not going to happen entirely. But have you noticed how more and more bad cops are getting exposed? And so, to a degree, you have to admit, I'm living to see that day come. And it's thrilling because, think about it. The police department, first responders, and the military, they all are out there shielding us. And they don't get a thank you. They don't get somebody supporting them and saying, I appreciate you. And if they do, it's rare. If they do, they hang on to that. You have no idea, people, how they just embrace that. And so I started the prayer group. I started driving. I would go I'm not kidding, I had those big fat phone books in my car, and I would look up all of the police stations manually. We did not have Google back then. And I would rip out that page where I would find a police department, and I would get in my car and I would drive, go find it. And I would let them know, I'm praying for you. I appreciate you. And what do you want me to pray for? And they always appreciated it. And so I would drive to the next town and do the same. Drive to the next town, to where I was on this big venture and determined that I was going to outline our state and come right back around to where I lived. And I was going to go town to town to town. And I was going to visit everybody. And I wanted them to be reassured that there's somebody out there in the shadows praying, loving them, loving what they do, and appreciating their service. And unfortunately, I never got totally done with my hunt and of, finding all of them, because, the thing that is so hilarious, it was like, just as I would pass a radius of a couple of 100 miles, all of a sudden you would hear another village got a grant to where they started getting more cops, to where they started getting a station and things like that. And so I thought, phooey, I'm just going to keep on going forward. And if there's ever a day I've got enough breath in me, I'll go back and zigzag all over the state and figure out who I've missed. I have a log, I have a journal, and whoever gets it, if anything happens to me, will crack up because there's scribbles all over it. I talk to people that are not around anymore. Talk to people that are definitely, retired, and they appreciate that stuff. So anyway, the same thing happened when I started thinking about the first responders. And it was because the first responders used to come up to that McDonald's when I was only 18. And, I thought, you cannot be left out. Everybody is, and it was really late for the first night that I noticed them coming up there for a quick burger. And I'm thinking to myself, everybody is in bed, and they don't even know you exist, probably. So I soon added them. And before I knew it, I started adding military, because they're the other ones. They deserve a lot of prayer. And when I graduated from high school, back when the dinosaurs were free, well, our guys were coming home from Vietnam. So, it was so funny because that was not all that voluntary. There was a draft, then became a lottery. None of it was a fun era. And everything in air tied in with a different perspective to where morale was being lost. And it was because of what happened to the Vietnam War and the truth behind it and what they did to our guys. And so I really saw a very, very large, a horrific size need for prayer, for not only the morale, but also the enthusiasm to represent our country and to be our country's shield. We're all the time saying, why send our boys over here or over there, or whatever? Well, you've got to really analyze a lot of this, because, if America is going to be successful, they need to be the keepers of the gate. And we need to be the watchmen on the wall. And we can't do that if we're going to go like this. Oh, sorry, you've got troubles over there. By no means am I saying needless lives, are lost and it's okay. By no means am I saying, we've got countries that still won't pay us back that we have helped. And, I don't think that we should be running to their rescue all the time when they can't even pay us back. And so, there's a lot to it, a lot of facets. But all in all, two wrongs don't make a right. I'm proud of being an American, but I'm most of all very proud being a prayer warrior and being in prayer over law enforcement, first responders, and absolutely the military. And I have a lot of people all across the nation, a lot of cops all across the nation, that I don't want to be known for who I am. Because after I walk out of a room, I want to leave a presence that they know who Jesus is. And for them to get hungry and thirsty, to have a relationship. Because I'm sure many of them are praying when they go out and they do their job and they're facing things that you and I can't imagine. So if you think of it, I would love you to join in. I would love you to be praying. And it just thrills me to stop and think that people have asked me about it. And, since 1970, It's a long time. And I'm pretty proud. And I don't want it to be a political thing. I just want it to be a loving thing, to where we are conditional. You know, we honor the people that are in these professions, that are honorable with integrity, that are, you know, definitely patriotic with a passion. And, you know, that's what my final prayer is, not only for them to be safe and for them to know that they can lean on their first love, who is Jesus Christ, but also for the louse of a professional, to, you know, like the bad cops, like the bad first responders, like the bad military people. I want them to have the light shine on them, to where not only can we do something for them, but for them to get hungry to change. You know, there's always going to be bad in the world, always. But we've got to see to it that we're encouragements. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. It's late enough. And I really hope you guys have a great night. I truly do. And please, please don't forget, you know, be humble and be joyful and be rapture ready. Those are not just words. They're coming from my heart. And it's going straight to you. So hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me what you think. So, okay, have a great night.